It's funny how when you start talking about something and then the universe talks back. I was talking, I think it was last night, in the dark, about about I how I have kind of conflicting feelings about um, being a part of the mob, um, and calling a guy who was kind of abusing whatever imaginary positions YouTubers of with large um, followings have on YouTube, and abusing that to kind of come on to young women on the internet. And it's funny how that and I was like, I feel kind of conflicted about that, about did I in some way come to notice from that, and I always think about that as part of my history on on BookTube, on this platform. But I was listening to Canada Land. It's a podcast hosted by Jesse Brown, which he came to prominence because he had started up a media criticism um, this media criticism podcast just around the time when one of our major radio personalities on CBC, Gian Gameshi, came into the news because he had been he was somebody who was actually kind of violently um, assaulting women, sometime in some in relationships, was being horrendous at work. He went to court, where unfortunately the usual justice system stuff came up with enough kind of nonsense for him to get acquitted. He did actually apologize for for assaulting one woman in exchange for having the charges dropped, but he had a very vague apology. Um, he's tried a number of times to come back into the public as some kind of a personality, and last time was a kind of a DIY as a DIY podcast that he'd kind of done himself. This time is more funded. Um, and Jesse was sort of like saying like, well, this is something I have to bring forward yet again because he's never addressed what's happened, what he did. He's never kind of made any particularly meaningful apology. He's like, I'm going to pretend it never happened, and in hopes that people will forget about it, and I will be able to kind of allowed back um, in some kind of dimension. He's trying to find kind of safe spots where he can do this without being called at it. So, and Jesse, it's interesting because Jesse Brown was saying like, I feel that he feels in a lot of ways that like, that was his big first story that he broke, and that sort of made him as a podcaster. And it's he feels like it's sort of his responsibility to continue to bring it back up. Like, if he comes back up, it's like, well, he's not addressed these things, and when's he actually going to address these things if he wants? Because he believe there's such a thing as forgiveness, but first there's got to be truth. It's truth and reconciliation. um, you need to have both. You can't have, okay, I'm just going to ignore it until everyone forgets about it, and then I'm just going to go on with my life and whatever. So it was an interesting, good reminder because I have a feeling that someone like Jesse Brown was in the back of my mind when I made my video um, expressing my disappointment and anger towards this fellow. Um, yeah, yeah. So it was a good reminder of and he was doing it as like as a reporter, but as a reporter who had sort of heard these women had come to him with their stories, and he had tried to do his best by them, and was still trying to do his best by them. It's like, this is something I owe them, as well as I think it's probably owing Canada just to like not let this guy off the hook. Someone who has not, um, is still trying to just sort of get his way back into things. And sometimes I do think about it with this guy who this was all done on, when I heard about all this stuff happening. I heard about it on, um, from some kind of a reference from on Twitter, very just kind of half, like maybe it was like, there was a comment in a thing, and I went and I looked at the Twitter stuff where all this was happening, and was really shocked and appalled, because I'm someone who doesn't do Twitter, that all this stuff was happening. And like, I was somebody who was watching and commenting, enjoying this guy's videos, him and this other fellow videos, but had no clue that something like this was happening. I was quite horrified that I was, um, associating myself with this person without knowing what was going on. And so I took it upon myself to make a video of it, to say, this is what was going on. This is the stuff that is presented online. This is the stuff, in his own words, that he was also basically corroborating their accusations. Um, and so, yeah, yeah, I guess it makes me feel a bit better. It sort of reminds me of that headspace. So, you know, I still feel regret that this is, I still feel sad that, BookTube isn't an unadulteratedly wonderful place. Um, there's dark sides to it. There are nasty people. Um, you know, People are people. There's going to be all sorts on this platform as anyone, because it's got human beings on it. But it was a good reminder. Just that was the universe talking back to me, reminding me, hey, this is why you did this. Remember, remember that. Yeah. So thank you, universe. Thank you, Jesse Brown. Thank you, Canada Land, for reminding me about that. All right.